Cops arrest a black woman at the gas station. Next day, she walked in wearing the judge's robe. The morning sun hadn't even risen when flashing red and blue lights painted her face in panic and disbelief. People stared, phones out, judging her without knowing who she was. A woman humiliated in public, bleeding dignity and silence. But what the world didn't know was that the next morning the same woman would walk into court, head held high, wearing the black robe of justice. And when those same officers looked up and saw her sitting behind the bench, the entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. The night air was thick with gasoline fumes and flashing lights as the old Petro stop station in the quiet suburb of Fairbanks sat half asleep under a pale moon. Cars hummed past on the highway, but inside the lot, chaos was quietly building. The woman, her name was Camille Vance, though no one there cared to ask, stood beside her sedan, the nozzle still in her hand, her eyes tired but calm. She had just finished a long day in chambers at the state superior court, reviewing complex case files and signing emergency orders, the kind of meticulous, invisible work that keeps justice alive. But tonight, she wasn't Judge Vance. She was just another weary commuter driving home late. When the patrol car pulled up, its headlights cutting across the station like a blade, her instincts told her to stay still. The officers stepped out, two of them, Officer Kellen and Officer Reyes, both young, nervous, and already looking for guilt before truth. "Ma'am, we got a report of suspicious activity regarding a vehicle matching your description," Officer Kellen said, his tone carrying the weight of assumption. Camille blinked, confused. "I'm just getting gas," she replied softly. Her voice was steady, but inside a familiar, weary anger stirred. The kind of anger born from knowing exactly how this story usually ends. As she handed over her driver's license, Officer Reyes squinted at it, the name meaning nothing to him. "Judge Vance," he read aloud, smirking faintly. "That your real name, ma'am?" The other officer circled behind her, hand already hovering near his holster. A silent, calculated performance of control. A small crowd began to form, people pulling out phones, their whispers filling the night. Camille kept her eyes on Officer Kellen's badge, not in fear, but in cold defiance. She'd sentenced men for less than what he was about to do. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," he ordered. She hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. The officer grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Her phone fell, clattering to the ground, the screen lighting up with a photo of her and her late father, a decorated police captain who'd spent his life fighting for equality in the same department that now humiliated his daughter. The irony burned deeper than the pain in her wrists. "I haven't done anything wrong," she shouted, her voice trembling as the cold pavement met her cheek. Cameras clicked, recording her dignity being stripped away frame by frame. The taste of dirt and gasoline filled her mouth as she tried to breathe through panic and disbelief. She saw faces, strangers, witnesses, none of them stepping forward. A woman in the crowd whispered, "Why is she resisting?" Another man muttered, "Just comply." No one saw the blood on her lip. No one heard the quiet plea beneath her breath. "Please, I'm a judge." The words fell on deaf ears. To them, she was just another suspect, another body in cuffs. Officer Kellen tightened his grip, pushing her knee against the ground, his voice sharp. "Stop resisting." The lie echoed across the gas station like a siren. Camille closed her eyes, and in that instant, she wasn't just fighting them. She was fighting history. Every headline, every bias, every quiet courtroom whisper that said she didn't belong. When the cuffs clicked shut, the world became still. She was lifted roughly to her feet, her sweater torn slightly, her hair messy, her pride shattered, but her spirit unbroken as they shoved her into the back of the cruiser. Officer Reyes muttered, "You people never learn." She turned her head, meeting his eyes through the glass, and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Neither do you." He didn't understand it then, but the next morning he would. The silent night and the dawn. The engine roared to life, the Petro stop fading in the distance, leaving behind a scene of flashing lights and stunned silence. Inside the patrol car, Camille's breathing slowed. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She only thought of the courtroom, her courtroom, and how the same law that humiliated her tonight would rise with her tomorrow. Her mind replayed her father's old words. "The robe doesn't give you power, Camille. It reminds you who you are when they try to take it away." By the time the car reached the central precinct, the city was asleep, unaware that its headlines were being written in real time. Camille sat quietly in the holding cell, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Every clang of the cell door was a reminder of the system she'd sworn to uphold, and how easily it could turn against its own. She looked down at her bruised wrists and smiled faintly. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll see me differently. But for now, she waited, silent, bleeding, and patient, the calm before the storm that would shake their world. The morning light crept through the small barred window, spilling across Camille's face like a slow revelation. She hadn't slept. Her name still echoed faintly down the corridor from when the booking clerk read it aloud. Camille Vance. Some of the older, seasoned detectives had turned their heads in disbelief, whispering, uncertain if they'd heard correctly. But the younger officers didn't care. They'd already made their judgment. One officer had even laughed quietly and said, "Yeah, right, Judge Vance. Sure you are." Camille had looked at him with a calm, so cold it unsettled him for a second. Not rage, not despair, just the composure of someone who knew time itself was about to do her bidding. She sat on a hard bench, straight-backed, her hands folded in her lap, like she was already back on the bench. The same dignity they tried to strip away last night now wrapped around her like armor. Hours passed before her release papers were signed. The precinct captain had received a quiet but urgent call from the mayor's office. And suddenly, the tone shifted. No one explained anything to her. They just unlocked the door, returned her belongings in a clear plastic bag, and muttered, "You're free to go." But freedom didn't feel like relief. It felt like insult. Camille stepped out of the precinct, the cold morning wind brushing against her bruises. For the first time, she didn't hide the bruises. She wanted the world to see. The footage from last night had gone viral. Hashtag spreading. Hashtag Fairbanks arrest. Hashtag justice for Vance. Yet no one knew the truth. The woman pinned to the pavement was Judge Camille Vance of the State Superior Court. Driving home, she sat in silence, her car heavy with the smell of gasoline and fear. Inside her quiet house, a photo of her in a robe stood beside her father's old badge. She stared at her reflection, dried blood tracing her cheek, and let the pain forge her resolve. Across town, Officer Kellen replayed the video. Arrested woman identified as Judge Camille Vance. His stomach twisted. His partner muttered, "She didn't say she was a judge." But she had. He remembered her voice, calm and desperate. "Please, I'm a judge." Now it echoed in his head like a curse. The department phones rang nonstop. That night, Camille didn't dream of revenge, but of justice returning full circle. Tomorrow, the officers would stand in her courtroom, not as enforcers, but as witnesses. The law, she decided, would speak for itself. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we remind them who justice belongs to." Morning light gleamed off the courthouse marble as she entered. Whispers rippled through the hall. She was the woman from the viral video, the one dragged across concrete, now walking tall in a robe. Heads turned. Silence followed. At the bench, she paused, steady and unbroken. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced, his voice trembling. Judge Vance leaned forward. "Before we begin today's docket, there's something this court must address." The room froze. She described the arrest, her voice calm, deliberate, unflinching. Every word struck with the weight of law. How her rights were denied, how the presumption of guilt stained justice itself. Then she said, "Justice does not wear a color, and neither should the presumption of guilt. The law demands respect, and that respect must begin with those who carry the badge." The officers' eyes lifted, filled with shame. For the first time, they didn't see a suspect. They saw the woman they had broken, now restored in power. Camille adjourned quietly, gathered her files, and walked out beneath a wash of sunlight. The crowd outside parted in reverent silence. She was no longer a victim, but the author of her own redemption, a judge who turned humiliation into a lesson on power, dignity, and truth.